Hello and welcome to the coronavirus lockdown live stream, the show that brings welcome levity to the end of the world, lifting the spirits of many of you currently in self-isolation by infecting as many as possible with comfort and distraction as the apocalypse unfolds. How the heck are you all? As I glance at the stats, I see that there are 42-ish people watching across Facebook and Twitch. Thank you so much for carving out some time in your weekend to indulge me and my guests. And we have an exciting green room lined up, I can tell you. First of all, how is the audio? Am I a bit glitchy again today? Let me know. The sound is working, says Gabrielle. Okay. Hopefully the audio and video isn't too bad. Wow. Okay. Margus is saying audio is good, so that's encouraging to know. Debbie Aquino has a correction for me. Lloyd Evans' last name is pronounced Aquino. Okay. Sorry about that, Debbie. So I'll try to remember that, although I am terrible with names full stop. So I'll try to remember that your last name is pronounced Aquino. Nilda is looking forward to the show. I think these are comments from before I went on air. Denise wishes everyone a very good morning. Ramona is wishing everyone a good day from Dallas. It's rainy in Dallas, apparently. Oh, dear. It's muggy in Louisiana, according to Eric. Jane Lee Fonda wishes everyone a good morning. Well, I suppose it's not really morning, depending on where you're watching. That's the beauty of these live streams, is we have people from all over the world. Here in Croatia, it's, let's see, just gone 5 in the evening. Angie Madero is watching from LA. I do love LA. Love to have an excuse to go there when opportunity arises. Denise is watching from Florida, partially opened. It's a mess. Yeah, it's because the whole point of the lockdown live stream is to entertain people through the lockdown, but we're already experiencing the lifting of the lockdown, either in full or in part, in various parts of the world. And you could argue that in many places it's being lifted prematurely. I mean, here in Croatia, it's quite low. The number of deaths and the number of infections has been comparatively quite low. So you would think, well, there's a case there for lifting the lockdown. And I can't complain, because when you've been in for weeks, as you'll all be aware, you do go a bit stir crazy, and you're chomping at the bit to get out. And I have been out a little bit. But at the same time, people are already talking in Croatia about a second spike in autumn. So it does feel like this is just going to be an ongoing thing, basically until there's a vaccine, you know? So I can see the lockdown live stream continuing for some time yet. Margus is watching from Haapsalu in Estonia. Lovely to see you, Margus. Beetroot Soup is saying hello to all on Twitch. Uric Lee is watching from London. So lots of different places represented. Tennessee there, according to Tina. Paul is watching from Woodstock, the Virginians. Interesting. Michigan is in the house, according to Hal Prent on Twitch. So lots of places represented, and I'm really delighted. Oh, and Alicia's here as well. Alicia is here for every episode, it seems, despite being in New Jersey, where it's really, really late. So always a pleasure to see you, Alicia. Thank you for being ever present in the comments. So what I customarily do is start the show with a reading. I'm currently, as you know, going through Take Back Your Life, Recovering from Cults and Abusive Relationships by Janja Lalich and Madeline Tobias. And I'm at the subheading in chapter 7, which is titled Taking Back Your Mind. I'm at the subheading of The Poverty of Black and White Thinking. After a long time spent viewing the world in the rigid, dogmatic, black and white, good and evil, right and wrong light of the cult's training, it takes time to sort through pre-cult, cult, and post-cult values and worldviews. As an independent person out in the world once again, the former cult member must choose his own morals and values. It is not enough to just leave the group. A new life must begin. Seeing the world in black and white is one outcome of exposure to cult ideologies. Cults create a world in which all the answers are known, to the cult alone, of course. This type of thinking protects members from the anxiety of thinking for themselves. It keeps them cooperative and controlled. When people first leave a cult, some may temporarily reverse their values so that everything that was bad is now good, and vice versa. This is still a limiting construct that is simply a different version of the black and white formula. In fact, truth and life are made up of many shades of grey. This realization can be frightening because it forces people to accept that there are no easy answers. One former member described her approach to this dilemma. To help dismantle this all or nothing thinking, I began to ask myself, where is this on the grey scale? This question became a favourite of mine and was very helpful as I struggled to undo 7 years in a black and white world and 17 years in a dysfunctional family. I found that life is full of shades of grey. To reinforce this point to myself, I wandered into a redecorating store one day and looked at the number of paint samples from white to grey to black. There were dozens of shades. I saw so clearly that, indeed, there is more to life than black or white. Wow. Because we've been reading some portions of this book that, frankly, it's a little bit dubious as to whether you can apply it to Jehovah's Witnesses, but that just perfectly, doesn't it? Perfectly nails what it's like. I appreciate not everyone watching the lockdown live stream will be from a Jehovah's Witness background, obviously. But I know many of you are from that background, and it's a black and white movement, isn't it? A black and white narrative. So, you know, challenging yourself and finding your own authentic ideology after leaving has to be a little bit more nuanced than, okay, everything that they said was bad is now good, and everything they said was good is now bad. So, yeah, it's got to be a little bit more sophisticated. But we will bring in our panelists, our green room, and we have, I'm delighted to announce, we have Sherry D'Souza and Eric Wells from Recovering from Religion. How the heck are you both?
Excellent.
I'm doing well. Been a little under the weather the last few days, but I'm doing well this morning.
It's a real thrill to have you on, Eric. Quite a luminary in the in the post-religion movement. So yes, how, to what extent do you think the lockdown is impacting people who are kind of in that transitional phase? Because I suppose for many it's giving people an opportunity to start thinking for themselves for once.
I kind of see it a little bit in reverse, unfortunately. I see it that this is a lot like what the Jehovah's Witnesses have been teaching, that this is the end times, that folks are going to go back to what they know as being comfortable, back to their their old religion, their old beliefs, their old community, and it's easy to kind of fall into the letting someone else think for you, and when they are telling you like, oh, this is the end times, that it's easy just to go back into that and go back to what you know and what feels comfortable. So we do, however, at Recovering from Religion, we're seeing a huge increase in folks reaching out to the helpline, reaching out, calling us, and then also joining the support groups. So that is kind of a good sign that I'm wrong.
Yeah. By the way, I love your backdrop. That's just the perfect backdrop for. That's a true bunker that you're in there. I mean, that's the place to sit out Armageddon, isn't it? Perfect, with the authorities banging down the door. Yeah. Because I named my studio the bunker, kind of alluding to some propaganda material that was put out by Jehovah's Witnesses, where they showed witnesses sheltering together in like a basement, which is more like what you're in,
right.
As the authorities were closing in on Jehovah's Witnesses, because they have this paranoid belief that the closer we get to Armageddon, the more the world's governments are going to become fixated with Jehovah's Witnesses and stopping what they're doing. So they have this this portrayal of like armed police in riot gear busting down the door of someone's basement to incarcerate the occupants. So yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a martyr type mindset.
Yeah,
that we have to die for our beliefs and for a cause, but even if it's completely made up and imaginary.
Persecution
absolutely.
porn.
Yes.
That's what we call it, persecution porn. Yeah, they really do seem to get off, you might say, on the idea that the authorities are coming for them. And of course, unfortunately, we see some governments kind of handing it to them on a plate. I mean, in Russia, it's illegal to be a Jehovah's Witness, and there's even been reports of witnesses being tortured in that country. And of course, as you can imagine, the leadership just laps up these stories and says, well, here you go, here's evidence that Satan's world is persecuting our organization.
I think that recently some Christians went into North Korea and trying to pass out Bibles, and they got in a bunch of trouble. And then a few years ago, there was this uncontacted tribe somewhere in the Indian Ocean or something, and they had made it very clear that they want to be left alone. But there was a few missionaries who thought that they were called to go out and spread the word of their God, spread their propaganda, and they got killed for it. They were speared, and they became martyrs in their religion.
Yeah, it really is astonishing. Sherry, since and I know that you've kind of been involved with Recovering from Religion for a few weeks now, what's it been like getting things up and running in Australia? Has there been much interest?
Yes. It's been absolutely fantastic. We just had our second support meeting via Zoom this morning. Actually, no, yesterday morning. It's 1 a.m. here on Sunday morning. So it was on Saturday, and it was absolutely fantastic. We had 13 come along, and we had 19 on the first meeting. And it's just been really healthy for people to share their stories and be able to just speak about their lives and their thoughts and their doubts without any judgment, with just acceptance in a safe place. And I'm loving it. It's just been, it's a really fantastic experience, both for those that come along to the meeting, but for me as a support group leader, and for Naomi Mora, who's also co-hosting with me. I can't say enough about it. I'm just absolutely loving it. It's a fantastic experience. it feels really, really good to be taking all of the passion, all of the trauma, all of the difficulties of having left the witness religion, and to turn that into something very positive, to be able to help other people. It's just it's way more than the 10 years of regular pioneering, right? That was this is eclipsing it, something else.
That was training. That was training for you, Sherry.
Right.
Jehovah's organization has given you the tools that you need to do what you're doing. Are we able to kind of back up a little bit and kind of talk a little bit more broadly about the work of recovering from religion? Because as far as I'm concerned, I mean, I've spoken before about how the work that I do has this effect of, you could say, generating almost a stampede of people who are in need of precisely the resources that you guys offer. And one thing that I'm curious about is, what's the maximum capacity? Because we get so inundated at JWsurvey with requests for support. I mean, just how equipped are you to deal with people who are coming out of these groups?
You want me to take this?
Yeah, I think so.
We are very equipped to take them. We have folks who are coming in to chat with us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, into the recoveringfromreligion.org website. We have folks who are calling in from all over the world as well. We just recently set up 2 new phone numbers, one in the UK, one in Australia, for folks to call in and actually speak with a trained agent live. And then in addition to that, we have got support groups all over the world, and we're always looking to form more support groups. And these are, this is kind of where Recovering from Religion started, was these support groups where we have in-person meetings. We find a private room. It's like Alcoholics Anonymous without the higher power, without the 12 steps. But we've got these groups all over the world, and we're always looking to form new ones. And they meet once or twice a month in person. Well, not now, obviously. We're doing the Zoom calls now, but we haven't met our capacity yet. And what's kind of neat is that we can also always take volunteers. There are a lot of folks who, kind of like myself, when I was religious, I did a lot of proselytizing, and I did a lot of conversion, and like, oh yeah, come to the church, you be a Christian. I did some missionary work, and now I'm kind of wanting to undo that in some sense by being a support group leader, and some folks kind of do that as a trained agent, and then who takes chats and takes calls. So as long as we keep getting volunteers, and we're gonna be able to keep helping out the number of people that come, like the number of people that ask for help.
That's really good to hear. I was described before how kind of deflating it can be sometimes when we do go through busy spells at JWsurvey, and sometimes we'll get emails through, and I tend to see most of them, and you start scrolling, and then you keep scrolling, and then you keep scrolling, and and my heart sinks more and more the more I'm scrolling, because I'm thinking the more stuff there is here, the harder it's going to be for me to troll through it all and give any kind of answer. So the fact that you have multiple people on hand to help with that is fantastic, and we'll certainly continue to point people in your direction.
We have 42 support groups around the world, and we have several hundred volunteers on the backside, both as support group leaders like Sherry, or as trained helpline agents to pick up the phone or be on the other end of a chat.
That's really good.
Say, now I'm triggering myself, actually, because I'm about to say, now is the time. But no, now is actually a really great time to be part of these support groups because it's virtual. So it doesn't matter where you are. You can, as long as you've got the hardware, as long as you've got the computer and the smartphone or the iPad or the whatever electronic device, you can participate in any of these meetings around the world. I mean, we had people today that were from the States, from all over Australia, and they're all sharing their stories. They're all feeling safe enough and comfortable enough to be able to talk. And we didn't just have ex-witnesses today. We had ones who had come from a Roman Catholic background. We had another person from Church of England background. In our first meeting, we had Mennonite and Southern Baptists. So it's really, really healthy to see that all of the trauma that we've gone through as ex-witnesses, it's not belittling it in any way, but seeing that others have gone through very similar experiences, just with a different label, a different religion, but it's the same methodology, it's the same techniques, it's the same control patterns that you see. And all of us are trying to reconcile that and get through the same trauma as everybody else. And that just really, for me personally, it helps me see it from another point of view and to sort of step back and take a breath and realize this is bigger. This is much bigger. And to be able to help at that level, I'm so loving it. I'm really, really, really just, I think I've found my place, and I'm just, I'm very happy about that.
Are you able to speak a little bit about the kind of crossover between listening to and supporting people in that situation who are coming out of an abusive or controlling religious group, and the need for professional therapy? I mean, presumably, you're describing hundreds of volunteers. Presumably these are volunteers who are tasked with listening and pointing people towards professional therapy where it's appropriate, rather than attempting to offer it themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I myself am not a trained therapist. I don't have that type of background. I'm a trained contractor. I do remodeling work, and I can build walls and put up drywall, but I don't have any training in professional therapy. What we're doing with the support groups and the helpline is all peer support. It is just us being here for one another. However, we have recognized the need for professional therapy, and from that we've created the Secular Therapy Project. And this is a project where we have reached out to, and I think we've got about 800 secular therapists listed in our Secular Therapy Project. We've reached out to these therapists, or they've come to us. They've been screened by other therapists to make sure that they fall into several criteria. Number one, that they are licensed in their country or their particular state or province. Number two, that they provide evidence-based training. So there wouldn't be any like naturopathy or anything like that. And then what is the third one? Number three is they're not religious, because we don't want to have folks show up to one of these secular therapists and then have them say, oh, you need to pray more, or check out this Bible verse or something like that. I know for me, several years ago when I was looking for a therapist, I stumbled into one, and it was about 3 or 4 sessions in, and they started to say, oh, well, yeah, you need to kind of read the Bible more. You need to pray more. And I'm thinking to myself, I just wasted my time. This is, I've just come out as an atheist, and I needed to talk to somebody. I didn't even know about RFR. This was about 7 or 8 years ago. I didn't even know about recovering from religion. So we have set up the Secular Therapy Project, and that is when it becomes a little bit too much for us as peers to support them when it kind of becomes obvious that they need much more than I could provide or a trained helpline agent can provide, then we do recommend that they check out the Secular Therapy Project.
Excellent. Yeah, I guess it's a tricky one because with my work, I mean, I'm obviously an atheist, and I'm very open about my atheism on my YouTube channel, but I've also kind of come to appreciate that not everyone who watches the John Cedars channel and derives benefit from it will necessarily be an atheist, and I certainly don't expect that of my viewers. And I can imagine there being lots of ways of escaping from a harmful religious group into something that is less harmful and kind of works for them. But I do understand what you're saying. I mean, if someone is signing up for secular therapy, then it kind of makes sense that it is truly secular, and there is no opportunity for someone's personal religious views to kind of influence the therapy that they're delivering. So that does make sense.
That's actually one of the things I really love about recovering from religion is it's not about what you end up believing at the end. It's about supporting you through the process. So as you have the doubts, as you have the questions about whatever religion you're coming from, obviously in this case, Jehovah's Witnesses, it's not about telling you what the conclusion is. It's just about supporting you through the process so that you come to your own conclusion. And I really, that resonates with me. I love that goal, that it's not about conversion. It's not about proselytizing. It's not about telling people, well, obviously there's no God. It's not about that at all. It's just, you need to find your own truth. You need to find your own way. And the role we play is just to help you do that. That's all. There's no judgment. It's completely unconditional. And that in itself, obviously, as an ex-witness, is totally liberating, just in the concept of letting people be themselves. It's a wonderful thing. I love it.
Lovely. And do you have anything to add to that, Eric? You seemed...
No, I totally wholeheartedly second Sherry's sentiment. We meet them where they're at. We're not here to deconvert at all. We don't even give advice, really. It's just, look, here are some resources for you. And yeah, I can totally understand where you're coming from. We're here for one another. That's all we've got is one another. And when folks are beginning to doubt, or when folks are kind of experiencing their pain and trauma stemming from religion, oftentimes the community that they're in, the religious community that they know of, will not work to be able to express those doubts, to be able to talk about that pain. They're only going to say, like, either shove it under the rug, or say you need to pray about it harder, or here's some Bible verses to read. And so it's not a safe space. Oftentimes it's not a safe space to have those kinds of discussions, to express that kind of trauma. And so to kind of piggytail onto what Sherry was saying, we create the helpline, and we create the support groups to be that safe space to express those doubts, to ask those questions, and to kind of safely bring forward the pain and trauma.
Yeah.
I just need to give a shout out to Rianne, because I'm obviously a little bit distracted with hosting and with reading and doing, but I'm also sort of keeping an eye on the comments. And Rianne, it seems, is, if I'm not completely misinterpreting things, is struggling with COVID-19 symptoms. I think that's accurate to say. She's that's why I'm so scared too. Lots of I think, is it meditation or medication or autoimmune disease, MG? Yeah, she's describing being in quite some discomfort, and I know Rianne's I think son had COVID-19 earlier and has since recovered. So it seems to be seems to have found its way to her. So, Rianne, needless to say, you have our deepest sympathies, and I can imagine it being a very scary time for you, but we're all here for you. The good thing about having this sort of network of people from a shared background, a shared experience, is that we're in a stronger position to kind of group together and rally round. So please do feel as though you can call upon us if there's anything specific that you can be helped with. But it sounds as though you're receiving the medical help that you need. But if there is anything in particular, yeah, Rianne says there, yes, I've got COVID-19.
Oh, Rianne.
So, yeah, if there's anything that we can help with, please do call on us. Yeah, I understand you being scared. It's a very scary thing. I guess try not to
anger. Harness that anger, Rianne.
try not to overthink things, though, because it's it's a killer. And but it's also something that, without wanting to trivialize it, because unfortunately lots of people are trivializing it. I mean, we've spoken, you were talking before, Eric, about how, you know, this lockdown situation can also force people into the arms of sort of faith-based ideology, and you could really say the conspiracy theory stuff is along those lines, isn't it? It's harnessing people's fear and uncertainty to kind of railroad their minds into a certain way of thinking. So without wanting to trivialize COVID-19, at the same time, I think it's possible to overthink things, get the help that you need, but do try as much as possible to stay positive, because it isn't, it's not going to be a death sentence in all cases. Quite clearly, that's what's made it so successful, is that it doesn't kill everyone. It uses people as vectors to travel on to others. So
yeah, stay positive, just not COVID-19 positive.
Yeah, become COVID-19 negative as soon as possible. I think we all wish you a speedy recovery. Yeah, Rianne says, I'll keep in touch, guys, but no need for gods or fairies.
Good on you.
Good for you, Rianne. Good for you.
I think that's one of the hardest things for me coming out of being religious was, how do I express my sympathies without saying, like, I'll pray for you, or or it's all part of God's plan type of thing. And that was very, very tough to figure out and suss through.
Yeah, lots of feelings out there for Rianne. I won't show all of them, but if anyone's following the comments, there's a lot of love for Rianne right now, and rightly so. And we need to bring in a fourth panelist, because Kimmy is here. How are you, Kimmy?
Good morning.
And Charlie.
That's right, fourth and fifth panelist.
Kimmy, could you please make this video monetizable by dangling a cat?
Wait a minute, Lloyd.
Okay, you're on it.
Makeup and a cat. Oh,
there you go.
This is a makeup tutorial. Just for the record, YouTube, this is a makeup tutorial and a cat video.
Yeah.
So,
perfect.
So this is exactly what YouTube wants, and therefore I should be able to monetize this video. So that's fantastic. That's brilliant. So what's new with you, Kimmy?
Well, the state of Maryland has lifted its stay-at-home order. However, we have three counties and the Baltimore City that make up for 75% of the cases here in Maryland. So the county that Mark and I live in, Baltimore County, is now under a executive county stay-at-home order. So John Redwood still cannot get a haircut.
Oh dear, he's going to have a mullet soon, isn't he? Either a mullet or a ponytail.
So it's really the big deal is Baltimore City is inundated with cases, and we have a lot of county zip codes that butt up against the city. So, and a lot of cases here locally in our zip code are related to nursing homes. So, but whatever we can do to, keep people safe, and we'll do it. We're not going to drive out to another county to get a haircut or something like that.
Yeah, worst case scenario, I'm sure if the worst comes to the worst, I'm sure Mark would let you go at him with a pair of
I've
scissors.
offered. I cut my father's. Now, granted, my father's mostly bald. I cut my brother's hair, but Mark said no.
I'm just imagining him with a ponytail.
Yeah, the back of his hair is getting long. And Mark actually has wavy hair, so it's actually getting wavy. Because I'm always like, let it grow a little, you know?
Eric thinks that you should cut Mark's hair.
Can we do it on a future broadcast?
I think we should. Look, there's no time like the present. Drag him in front of the camera. Let's do this.
Yeah.
Jenny says, glad the cats are back. Kimmy?
Maybe you can get the cat a haircut.
I can. I do give Charlie a haircut. We could do that one live on camera.
Lip Lock No More says Arthur should sing along to It's the End of the World as We Know It. Arthur is AWOL. We don't know where Arthur is, unfortunately. But I've given up trying to keep a track of his whereabouts because he is something of an enigma.
So Lloyd, I want to, when we're ready for the segment, Lip Lock No More, who's a PMO, she submitted the limerick for this week.
Oh, well, let's just do that segment, shall we?
Sure, we shall.
Okay, let me just find the relevant button. And here we go.
I woke up this morning too soon. I couldn't escape meeting at noon, so I picked up on Twitch for a JW switch just as soon as I exited Zoom.
Oh, very good.
And that's from Lip Lock No More.
Thank
well
you,
done. Well done.
Lip Lock No More. Thank you so much for that. That was fantastic.
And we can just imagine her pain being a PMO and having to dial into those meetings, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's not an easy situation. Do you come across this a lot, Eric, where people are seeking your services of recovering from religion while still technically in the religion and pretending to be in the religion?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it happens all of the time. Because, like I kind of said, having these doubts and having these conversations is not safe to do for many folks in their own old communities, in their own old religious communities. In fact, there's even pastors and clergy members and priests and imams who who have these doubts, but their livelihood, their way of life is all wrapped up in being this the head of the religious organization. And so the Clergy Project has been set up in order to help folks like that to get out and to kind of find a new way to live outside of being a member of the clergy. So it happens all of the time, absolutely.
Yeah, we come across it. You know, we have obviously this, is it an acronym of PMO or POMO or POMI or PMI, depending on, so it's physically in, mentally out, or like physically out, mentally in, and presumably that's transferable to lots of, religions. You're trying to get out, but you're still physically in, or you're out, but you're still under the control of the indoctrination. So you're mentally in. So yeah, it's a real mess, to be honest.
Oftentimes when it comes to like young folks who are having their doubts, but they are reliant upon their parents or reliant upon their family, it's not safe for them to come out, or else they'll be kicked out and be left destitute and all alone with no help, no skills, no income or anything like that. So we always encourage folks to not come out unless it's safe to do so.
Indeed. Lawrence Smith says Lloyd needs to pick up the slack and sing in Arthur's place for this live stream. I nominate him sing a song about cats to make this live stream even more profitable. You can nominate all you want. But on this lockdown live stream, I have ultimate power. And I get to decide not to sing because I want to keep my audience.
But you do have the voice of an angel, Lloyd, so you could get away with it.
I do. I have the voice of an angel of death, specifically. Sherry, are you available to offer us any words of comfort?
I am prepared.
Okay, in that case, let me get the introduction ready. And again, I was a little bit conflicted and confused when I was creating this introduction. I wasn't entirely sure whether it was to do with fear or to do with comfort.
Yeah, be warned, Derek.
It ended up being a bit of both. Sherry's Comfort Corner.
I know it's coming, and yet still.
What the heck is going on?
I was.
You need an age disclaimer on that, Lloyd.
Deeply confused and having a bad day when I did that. So I apologize.
All right, everyone. So firstly, I have to say my presence here this morning, tonight, whatever day it is, it's 20 to 2 a.m. here in Sydney, Sunday morning. It's all Deanna Evans' fault because she encouraged me or prompted me or provoked me.
Manipulated and coerced. Yeah.
All of that, yes, to be here. So I'm drawing on for Sherry's Comfort Corner, a conversation that I had earlier with Sasha, who is fast asleep upstairs and has no idea what I'm doing down here. He shared with me a story that I thought would be really nice to share with everybody else. So I have to introduce you to, this is Mr. Thursday.
Hello, Mr. Thursday.
Hello.
Hey. Now, Mr. Thursday has a very special story that I only really learnt about last night. Mr. Thursday was given to Sasha by his grandmother, affectionately called Grammy. And Grammy, she was she's still alive. She's Austrian, and she grew up in Vienna during the Great Depression. And she told Sasha the story that during the Great Depression in Austria and Vienna, on Thursdays, they would go to the store. She'd go to the store with her mother to pick up some groceries and food for the family. And as a child, she would have only been about 6 or 7 at the time, she would go into a part of the store that had bears and toys. And there was a bear that looked very much like this one. And she called this bear Mr. Thursday. And every Thursday when they went to the shops, she would go and look for this bear and have a little conversation with him. It was her way of getting through the trauma of the Great Depression. Anyway, one Thursday came around and Mr. Thursday was gone. He wasn't there anymore. There were no bears in the store. And years later, Grammy is telling Sasha, her grandson, about this story, and she gives him this bear and says, "This is your Mr. Thursday." I was really touched when Sasha told me that last night. I thought that was an absolutely beautiful story, such a precious memory to have from his grandmother to him. And I think that all of us need a Mr. Thursday in one way or another. We need some kind of memory to latch onto that's beautiful and innocent and just something to be cherished. And that's what I wanted to share with everybody this morning or tonight or whatever time it is. Mr. Thursday.
That's beautiful. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Lovely. Thank you, Sherry.
That wasn't remotely fearful. Very,
No.
very much comforting.
I just want to know why the girl's wearing a thong in that swimming intro. But I know you're from Europe, so it's a different standard.
I like to think that some of the clips, because I obviously had a similar issue with Naomi's Bible box, and I like to think that I've at least contributed to the video making community by buying video clips that I can't see anyone else buying from these stock websites. So at least someone somewhere's picked up a paycheck on that one. But yeah, I guess for me, I mean, the reason why I'm surrounded by Star Wars and Star Trek paraphernalia is because it's kind of a positive memory from when I was still in the organization, when I was growing up as a Jehovah's Witness. A lot of what I went through was very, coercive and manipulative and controlling, and the positive memories that I had were almost exclusively to do with science fiction and or football. Everything else was really connected in some way with the organization. So that's why I view Star Wars as being like my new religion, because it's been like an ever constant throughout my life, and it's always been uplifting and entertaining and positive for me. So yeah.
But that's such an important point though, Lloyd, because in the meeting that we had this morning, our support group meeting, we talked about identity and how our identities are so tied up with our belief system. And so when we wake up from that belief system, we often have this existential identity crisis of who are we and what do we really believe. So it kind of makes sense to then think about the things that tethered us as children as to who we really are. Your love for Star Wars, Sasha's love for teddy bears, it's linking us to something outside of the religion, outside of the belief system that rings true to who we are as individuals. And it's so important that we have that, because when you leave religion and you walk away from it altogether, you're sort of forging your own path as to who you are as an individual. And that can be a very frightening, extremely frightening process. So you need to sort of link back to your origins and what's important to you and what you love.
Right. So Steve Hassan refers to that as your authentic self and your cult self, your cult identity. And so when you leave, you have to kind of, if you were born in, it's a little bit harder. But if you were somebody that joined the religion at a later age, you can start to figure out who you were authentically into that pre-cult identity. For me, when I left, it was trying out different things to kind of feel, what was right, and learning to trust my gut, and trying to do something like, am I doing this because it's expected of me, or am I really enjoying myself? So it took a while to kind of figure out, who I was authentically. Like, for instance, I became a vegetarian a year after I left. And then I would just like to say that cats are my Star Trek.
Absolutely. Well, understandably so. And that's explained a little bit more in the Atlantic article, isn't it, Kimmy? How and I actually learned I actually learned more about you through the Atlantic article, because I'd obviously visited your house before then and seen that, you were massively into cats. But it was only when I read the Atlantic article that the penny drops. It's like, now I understand. But what we're really talking about is kind of emotional anchors, I suppose, is one way of describing them. Jenny Smith says we all need a coping mechanism, and what a beautiful approach. Puck Grader says Sasha has just become a whole lot cuddlier. So
I think we need a PO box, Sherry, so everyone can send. He needs a Mr. Monday, a Mr. Tuesday.
Well, I have to tell you that when we discovered that teddy bears in windows, I don't know if you've heard of this phenomenon.
Yes.
It did actually start in the States. But when we first saw this, we thought, we've been waiting for this day our entire lives, because we've got like 20, 30 odd teddy bears. And so as soon as we got home, we were like, teddy bears in every single window. I mean, you can see them behind me. They're everywhere.
That's funny.
Oh, they're great.
We
Yeah.
have a
We have
question.
koala bears.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm wearing polar bears.
We need something more Australian centric, I'm afraid. So we have a question from Amanda. So I guess there's no other group of people who would have better advice or input than the people in this comment section. How do you stop your family who is still asleep from trying to brainwash your small children behind your back? This is something I've touched on a few times in my own videos, Amanda, because it is a real problem. It's actually the reason more than anything why my wife and I full on disassociated rather than trying to fade, because we were expecting our child and we knew that our believing relatives, if we had any kind of connection with the organization, they would try indoctrinating our child. And if we confronted them, they'd say, well, we're just doing what you're supposed to be doing. So we wanted a clean break. So it's a really difficult one. I guess you need to assert yourself as a parent in that situation. You have the absolute right to say, look, you don't get to brainwash my child. If you want to, if you care about my child's eternal salvation or them surviving Armageddon, speak to them when they're an adult. It kind of says everything about your own certainty in your beliefs. If you're only comfortable pushing it on people when they're children and when they're vulnerable and susceptible. So if you have security and confidence that your beliefs are true, share them with adults. Stick to, pushing them on adults rather than children. It's something that really, as you can probably tell, winds me up, the whole idea of child indoctrination.
To just second that, Lloyd, 2 weeks ago, with one of the RFR X talks. So every Monday night at the moment, Recovering from Religion is doing, Monday night US time, I should say. It's Tuesday morning Australia time. They're running a series of talks to to discuss issues like this. And I think it was 2 weeks ago, Dr. Darrell Ray made a comment about boundaries and that Jehovah's Witnesses, many religions, but Jehovah's Witnesses do this exceedingly well. They have no concept, no idea of boundaries. They think they have the right to ask you a whole lot of questions and to tell you how you should be raising your children and so many things. They don't actually have that right, and you have the right to set the boundaries around what you will allow and what you will allow to influence your children. They don't have the right to do that. You have the right to set what those boundaries are for your children. That's to second what Lloyd said, that's totally your prerogative.
And what's interesting is that even though we went to all of those, we jumped through all those hoops, you might say, by disassociating to make that abundantly clear that we wouldn't accept any kind of attempts at indoctrination. Despite doing all that, we've still had believing JW family members trying to indoctrinate Jessica. But what you find is that if you have a strong bond of communication with your child, you're going to find out about it whenever they make an attempt. And what you can then do is you can say, well, if you're not going to respect these very reasonable boundaries that I am entitled to set as my child's parent, you don't get to see my child. Or you get to see my child again once you will agree and promise that you'll make no further attempts at indoctrinating my child. So that's what we've had to do. And it hasn't been a case of, right, problem solved. There have been what you might call relapses, but at least the boundaries are very clear. And also our relatives know that if they try pushing anything on Jessica, because we have this very good communication with our child, Jessica's just going to tell us straight away and they'll be in trouble,
Yeah,
that's
so
a
lot of it is just purely about communication, having that really strong bond of communication with your child and your child understanding what's at stake So I've described as well in one of my videos, if you check out Bad Men, if you just put Cedars Bad Men, I describe the way I explained the whole issue of religion to Jessica. And to put it simply, I said, okay, there are these bad men who live in America. They live in a forest by a lake. They do. That's where the compound is. And they try to control people. And one of the ways they try to control people is by saying that they have a friend in the sky called Jehovah who can fix any of their problems. But when people believe the bad men are able to control them, and their power is so strong that they can stop people from loving each other. So that's why Mummy and Daddy resist the bad men. And the way that you fight the bad men is by asking questions. And the more questions you ask, the less the bad men can control you. And Jessica understood it in those terms. And so now it's actually quite funny because whenever she's been in a situation where, let's say, they've been saying a prayer with her in the room. So they've started saying the prayer and she's just, oh no. And she's kind of run out as quickly as possible. And which is the right reaction, which is the reaction we were aiming for. So I think, again, have that strong communication, but also let the child know what's at stake. And then they will be involved in the process of stopping this from happening, you know.
And I will add, Lloyd, one other thing is that we have to keep in mind that you have to expect that that's going to happen, especially in the beginning, because, you know, those family members or relatives, they think they're saving that child and that's expected of them. So you kind of have to you can't be naive necessarily and say, okay, they're not going to try and teach them or do this. So by keeping those, you know, lines of communication open and keeping an eye out, you know, and knowing what's going on, because we know that they're going to try, right? And I will say, your example is it's simple for a child to understand. I think you really should turn that into some sort of like little book, you know?
Yeah, we've talked about that.
Yeah,
I've talked about doing like a series.
About that. I really do.
Like a children's book series.
Or even a little children's video, right? Like anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Well, heaven knows they're doing it with Caleb and Sophia. So.
Right.
I noticed Mark's tried to get on, and I was just about to include him, but he's disappeared again.
Then he'll come back.
Yeah, so he's waiting in the wings. Jay Proctor says, you taught her well, Lloyd. Awesome. Jenny Smith says, yes, I watched the Bad Men video. Thought that was a great way to describe it. Very age appropriate. Denise Bartlett says, nice job, Lloyd. Amanda thinks Jessica is adorable. You know what? She does this thing. She does this thing where she comes to the bunker door, and there's this knock on the bunker door. And what I've started doing is just picking up my camera and going to the door and seeing what she has to say, because usually it's along the lines of, Daddy, can I come in? I want to talk to you about something. So then she'll come into the bunker and I'll say, what is it that you want to talk about? She'll say, well, when am I going to be on a video again? Well, not today, sweetheart, but I will have you on a video again, just not today. And so this is happening so frequently that at some point I'm just going to do a compilation of us having this exchange and her wearing a different outfit every day. And, you know,
when is she going to join the live stream again?
Goodness knows. Yes. She would jump at the opportunity. Someone who is joining the live stream is the for now non-mulleted Mark O'Donnell.
Mark, they want me to cut your hair during a live stream.
Kimberly has told us that you have very graciously agreed, for the purposes of entertaining and uplifting our audience, to let Kimmy go at you with scissors on the lockdown live stream. So thank you for that.
That would get some viewers, wouldn't it?
Can we? The highest bidder wins, right?
I'm going to tell you a story very quickly about when I was a teenager. So the elders approached me and said, we'd like you to give a talk at the circuit assembly. So I know we have a special guest here, and I don't know if you know a whole lot about Jehovah's Witnesses. I'm not sure what Sherry's told you. So we have these assemblies, and they were growing up. They were twice a year, and at the time they were 2 days in the spring, 2 days in the fall, approximately. So you would have special parts on the program where you'd have the main speakers, and then you would have what we call the theocratic ministry school, and then you'd get up there, and there were different parts. There was a 5-minute Bible reading part, or a 5-minute part where actually 2 female Jehovah's Witnesses could sit and talk to each other and talk about a Bible scenario, like a Bible study. So we had these assemblies, and they did the theocratic ministry school on the assemblies. So the elders came to me and said, so, you've been endowed with the privilege of giving a 5-minute Bible reading on the circuit assembly. And that was a pretty big deal back then, because it's a large assembly hall. Maybe 1,200 people were there. So you'd be giving a talk to more than 1,000 people. And so a few weeks before the circuit assembly, a local elder, in fact, he's one of the goon elders that arrived at our door right after the Atlantic article, one day after the Atlantic article. And, they ended up seeking to disfellowship, and they did disfellowship us for speaking out about child abuse. But the same goon elder had come to me back when I was 15 years old and said, your hair has gotten so long that we really feel that it is inappropriate. You would not be a good example, and you're not going to be giving that talk on the circuit assembly. And mind you, I had no concept of what long hair was. I didn't have long hair. It wasn't any longer than this right now. But I think their perception was that because it had gotten a little long in the back, and that my mother hadn't taken me to get a haircut, or they felt I was a rebellious kid, which they did. They felt I was disobedient to my parents. And I was not a bad kid. I never got in trouble. But in their view,
right. Right.
Well, let me preface that by saying, compared to all of my other Jehovah's Witness friends.
All right. Now
absolutely not.
Now the caveats are coming out. Okay.
Yeah.
Damn hippie.
Well, yeah. No, I mean, seriously, if I told people, stuff that I did when I was a kid, they'd say, you got to be kidding. You didn't do anything.
Yeah.
I mean, my rebellion was I went off, and traveled around the world. And, but they looked at me, and they never gave me a chance to fix it. They never said, you need to get a haircut before the circuit assembly. I think they were using that as an excuse for some other underlying reason to kick me off the program. But you got to understand that when you're a kid, it's devastating to receive, like, I'm going to be on the circuit assembly and give a talk, which is a nice privilege, as we used to call it. And with hair that's no longer than what I have now, they said no. And that was their excuse for kicking me off of the assembly program. And I approached that elder years later and said, I said, that really always bothered me, that you did that. And he said, oh, I don't even remember it. They don't realize that the actions and things that they do affect young people far greater than what they can ever imagine. And this elder never had children. So he's got no concept of what it's like to raise children. So he had no empathy. And that's the sad thing, is the lack of empathy with some of these people that are giving advice. And I heard you guys talking earlier about qualifications for giving advice. And, you rightly said, you identify whether or not you're a therapist. And
so there's listening and being a listener to someone, providing a basic support function. But that would always be provided with the caveat that can't replace professional therapy, So it would be aimed at identifying, I presume, without wanting to speak for Eric and Sherry. It would identify, if necessary, areas where a professional therapist might be needed.
Yeah. But Mark, what you were saying there too, it's so dependent on personal opinion. So that brother that told you couldn't speak, you could not go to be on the circuit assembly program, it was entirely based on his personal opinion. I remember years ago in Perth, where a few of us pioneers were to be interviewed, and the morning of the circuit assembly, one of the pioneers was outruled from being part of the program because her skirt was too long.
Mm.
Not that it was short, but it went to the ground. And because it went to the ground, that was a fashion statement. That was following a worldly trend. So therefore, she was not to be part of the program. And that was entirely dependent on that particular circuit overseer's personal opinion. That it just, I mean, how more man-made could you obviously be?
That's funny, Sherry, because that was something that was going on in my old congregation as well. They were counseling me because my skirt was down to my, it wasn't to the ground. It wasn't one of those fashion skirts. It was just literally down to my ankles. And I never quite understood that. And I also was giving a part on the circuit assembly, and I had one of those dresses on in the 90s that had the two side slits, but both slits didn't even come up to my calf. Like, they weren't high. They weren't even to my knee. They were to my calf. They made me go find safety pins and pin them down on the side so that I wouldn't show too much leg.
I can so relate to that, Kimmy. I can so relate to it. I remember having a suit, a cream suit, that the skirt was down to the ankle, but it was one of those wraparound skirts where the side could open up. Mm-hmm. And I got it. I went to a dressmaker and had it stitched down to the knee so that it would not open up as I walked. And I remember the seamstress looking at me very oddly like, you want me to what? But that's what we did.
I think it's safe to say that there are a few religious groups. I mean, look, I'm not an expert on all religions, but I can't imagine there being too many groups that are as fastidious about appearance as Jehovah's Witnesses, considering Christianity is supposed to be about the inner person and the secret person of the heart and one's personal relationship with God and all that kind of thing. They are obsessed with appearance. And I try to be thick-skinned as much as possible. And I've kind of had to grow thick-skinned being a YouTuber over the years. But one thing that always sets me off is when I get comments saying, "Oh, you should get a haircut. Why don't you brush your hair? Why don't you have a shave?" And every now and then I'll say, this is really interesting. So, in your everyday life, are you in the habit of trying to control how other people look and other people's grooming and appearance? Or is it just when you're feeling brave in the comment section of a YouTube video? I kid you not.
I think it goes back, Lloyd, about the boundaries. How as Jehovah's Witnesses, right? We were raised not to have those boundaries, and it's
as JWs, you just trample over other people's boundaries when it comes to their dress and grooming, and you make it your business to police the way other people look and what clothes other people wear. I'm having none of it now. On the other side, I'll look how I damn well please, and I certainly would never dream of going up to a total stranger or even someone I know well and trying to insist that they should look the way I want them to look. It's a very narcissistic viewpoint,
Yeah, I remember you cutting your curls off, and like the waves of the controversy that caused, everyone telling you, "Why would you do that?"
Wow, it always grows back.
Well, I'm wearing my polar bear pajamas, and if anybody has a problem with that, too bad.
Well, I guess it is winter in Australia, right?
Yeah, and it's 2 a.m. on a Sunday morning, so
yeah.
There.
Mark and I were walking late last night, so I think we probably got back around 2 a.m. from our walk.
Tell us about these walks, because I think this features in the Atlantic article as well. It talks a little bit about your life and your routine. So tell us about these walks and how these have helped you with your kind of mental health.
So it kind of started after my friend Stephen died, and the grief that I was going through. This was 11 years ago or so, and I was still a witness then. So I started taking like a 2-mile walk through the neighborhood. And I found that it was helping me, kind of grieve and clear my head. And then Mark started joining me. So I would do the 2-mile loop, and then I'd come back and get Mark, and then he'd walk with me. So eventually we just kind of started going, pretty much every night. And then after Mark stopped attending meetings, we continued to walk. And this was the one time that when you're exercising like that, right, your wall goes down. So it was an opportunity kind of for Mark very carefully and to kind of, we talked about certain things. And so it was over that period, every night of us walking that, I was able to ask questions, or he was able to make statements to me. And that really helped me, especially the witnesses were trying to get me to like not spend time with Mark. So like I would go to the meeting on a Sunday and I would want to come home and, we would eat dinner together. Or one time we had the circuit assembly. And so I was just going to drive myself. But this one sister, she said, no, come with me and our family. We really want you to go with us. And we're going to go out to eat afterwards. And I said, look, I really appreciate it, but Mark and I are going to eat dinner together. Once I get home, I'll just take myself to the assembly. And then she said, well, don't worry about it. We're just going to eat at home. So we'll come pick you up. You can drive with us just for the association. And I clarified, okay, so you understand that we're not going out to eat, right? We're just coming straight home because I'm going to eat dinner with Mark. We're going to walk. And so I get to the assembly, and on the way there, they said, oh, by the way, we made dinner reservations with so-and-so for after the assembly. And I said, I'm not going to dinner. And they were basically almost holding me hostage and forcing me to not come home and walk with Mark. And so I ended up spending my entire lunch break finding some other ride home with someone in the area that was going home. But they never quite understood that. But that is really what helped me. We were under a tremendous amount of stress, strain in our relationship, and doing that walking really helped. It helps our health. And, we walk up, in the community. Now we kind of, we walk up to the local track at night. No one's there. And, we walked, what did we walk, Mark, last night? We walked a short, maybe 6 miles last night.
Oh, Mark, your microphone's muted, I think.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah.
It was 6 miles, and a couple nights ago we did 8 miles, and we've had a couple of marathon walks where we, go up to the shopping center and we'll walk to that section of where we live and continue on to the high school where there's a track, and then just do loop after loop after loop of the quarter mile around the track. And so there's been a few times where we've gone over 10 miles, and I kind of laugh sometimes because I see people say, hey, I just did a 5K or I just did a 10K. And, like we were doing that every single night, although it wasn't high performance cardio workout because we're walking, not running, and but we were doing a lot of miles. So, yeah, last night we did 6 miles. And I think we were at that point, we also started cycling. And so walking wise, we were accumulating over 3,000 or more miles per year. And then we started cycling. So that's when things got really interesting, because I had left the religion, stopped going to meetings the beginning of 2014, but Kimmy was still going to meetings. So we had this overlap where, she's still, all this stuff's going through her head. And I said, why don't we go up to this bed and breakfast up in Pennsylvania, and we can ride our bikes there. So what we do is we leave our car, we live, not too far from the northern border of Maryland. So we leave our car at the beginning of this trail. So what they've done in the US and other places is they've taken old railroad corridors that no longer exist, and they've converted them. Trails Conservancy and other groups have sponsored this. They've converted railroad lines into bike and walking paths. And these are terrific because railroad corridors are, of course, always on a very gentle grade, so you don't have any steep hills. So it's great for runners and bikers. So we left our car and started, we biked up to this bed and breakfast like 24, 25 miles away in New Freedom and another town in Pennsylvania. So we would, be able to talk the whole way up because it's great. There's no traffic. There's other, a few runners and bikers up there. There's waterfalls. It's all covered in a canopy of trees, and it's a bullet line. It's just the perfect way to get away from the city and enjoy and have nice conversations. And then we'd spend a couple of nights up at this bed and breakfast. And then we got to know the owner of the bed and breakfast. And I may have told this a story before that we also got to know the owners of the bike shop in town in New Freedom, Pennsylvania. And a little shout out to Ed and Kay, because I grew up working in bike shops, and by trade, I'm not a writer or an activist by trade. I'm a mechanical person, repair, fix, and
this program is not
build
sponsored by Ed and Kay's bike shop.
So, Ed and Kay are a couple that basically, were retiring and built this bike shop up in New Freedom called the Whistle Stop Bike Shop. And so I walked in the shop one day, and I didn't know who they were. There was this couple in there, and the woman was talking, and I heard her say something about, I'm an electrical inspector, and I was an electrical inspector in Baltimore County. And it's like, it rang a bell, and I realized, hey, hang on a second. So I went up to her and I said, did you say electrical inspector? And so, long story short, turns out that she had done the electrical inspections for my property back in 1998 when I bought my house. And at that time, she had given me a business card and said, my husband Ed and I are going to open up a bike shop in Pennsylvania.
That's cool.
So all those years later, 20 some years later, whatever, here we are meeting in Pennsylvania at their bike shop. So immediately that same day, now Kimmy, mind you, is still a witness. So this is what really started helping wake.
At the time.
Yeah. So she's like, in this, it was spring, summer of 2014. So she's in this wake up phase. And so
I wasn't even that. Yeah, I was.
She was
started talking. Yeah.
Getting ready to go to the district convention. We had our circuit overseer and missionary friends getting ready to come stay with us. So there was still a lot going on in her head and my head. So, I talked to the bike shop couple, Ed and Kay, and they said, hey, let's go get something to eat. You guys want to get some dinner? And this was like the first time I think this has really hit Kimmy that we're not going to be with just Jehovah's Witnesses any longer. We're going to be associating with worldly non-Jehovah's Witnesses. And that's a big deal. And like, she was a little uncomfortable about that at first. And we sat down with them and had a great dinner at the restaurant right next to the bike shop. And I was fully prepared for that, because I was like, very accepting of evereverone, at that point in my life, and always wanted to be.
But it was uncomfortable for me at first. I'm looking around, and I'm like, because I was already getting my friends and the local congregation. They would have thought nothing about me and Mark and I going to ride our bikes for the weekend or going away for the weekend. But once I was doing that, and he wasn't a witness anymore, they were saying, "Oh, you're going to miss the meeting. You're choosing the Mark over the meetings." They were putting this guilt on me, and so I was uncomfortable at first at dinner because we're with these non-witnesses, and then that actually helped me quite a bit to see that, oh, they're really nice, and I wasn't smited by God during dinner, and
that played a role. So we continued that and kept walking, and not only would we ride our bikes up to the bed and breakfast and stay there for several nights, but while we were up there, we would walk 4 or 5 miles a day back and forth into the town, and that continued, and that really helped Kimmy's wake up process and helped me. And so I recommend it for everyone. But then we became very good friends with the owner of the bed and breakfast, and she's become a really good friend. We go out to dinner with her and her husband every time we're up there. And she actually sold the bed and breakfast. We still go there, but she finally, after all those years, 5 or so years of our going there, she sold it, and we still go out to dinner with her and her husband. And she's gotten involved in local politics in Pennsylvania and ran for a political office up there. And she did really well. It's a very Republican state, and she did really well under the circumstances. But we've become just, very good. She follows my Facebook post and comments on them. And
the interesting thing is, she saw me from the beginning of that process, like going to the bed and breakfast, us telling our story, Mark talking to her privately a bit before so she saw my whole entire transition through, and that, it's interesting to kind of get an outsider's perspective on what that was like. My brother always likes to, point stuff out to me, kind of teases me now. But so that was when Mark and I started walking as well, it gave me an opportunity, like just simple things. We'd walk up to, say, Dunkin' Donuts and got to know the cashier. One time, an older lady was talking about how she lost her husband. And so we're talking about listening, active listening. And so I was able to like listen to this lady and not have to be planning, like, what scripture am I going to read to her? Or can I leave a tract with her? Am I prepared? So it helped me to kind of just exist and be a person in the community and listen and start to form normal relationships. And that was really instrumental in kind of,
And that's how we got on our softball team.
Right. Yeah. So I do suggest that if anyone else, and I'm sure there's many, Mark and I, we field messages all the time. So if someone has woken up, it's leaving or thinking about leaving or is left and their spouse is still in, to fight to spend time together and do something that isn't like you sitting down, like, you've got to watch all Lloyd's videos right now, right? But you need to spend time together because you have to cement that relationship. And then when you have that normal, you're spending that normal time together, especially when you're being active, it lets that wall down to where you can start to have a conversation. And like we've talked about before, that was the first time, and we were married 15 years prior to that. And then we started to actually share things that we kind of, as Jehovah's Witnesses, you're pretending to be somebody and not being that authentic self that we talked about. So kind of getting to know each other that way as well. So
yeah, like, for the two of you, the two of you were more important to one another than your beliefs were. And that's really a beautiful thing to hear, that the people were more important than the beliefs. And you guys sound like you fought for your relationship.
Mm-hmm. They did, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not uncommon for couples to break up immediately after the departure of one of the parties from the religion, whether it's through willing disassociation or disfellowshipping. It absolutely destroys marriages because they constantly say to the remaining witness partner that you must put Jehovah first, you must put God first, you must come to all your meetings, you must make sure that you keep in a spiritual routine, which means not being around your spouse, but coming to the meetings, going into the field ministry, participating in any kind of activities. This is what they were trying to do to Kimmy, but that would have driven a further wedge if she had immersed herself. And a lot of witnesses will do that. They'll immerse themselves in their what they call spiritual routine. And it's really unhealthy for a relationship to do that because it drives a couple further apart. And so we see breakups all the time. And then you have these crazy complications where there's a breakup for one reason or another, but if it's not due to adultery, then all of a sudden, if the couple does get a divorce, then, the surviving, the witness spouse cannot get remarried. And I don't know if our guest has heard of this or not, but, we have this, the witnesses have this concept of scriptural divorce. So if a couple does, for whatever reasons, domestic disputes, they get separated and then they get a divorce, they, according to the Jehovah's Witness religion, cannot get remarried, because if they do, they have not officially ended the marriage according to the religion, because it's a scriptural marriage, and the state doesn't end that if it's not due to the one thing you can get out of a marriage for, which is adultery, fornication, adultery. So there's all these witnesses I knew grew up in, until I left, all these witnesses who were stuck in this limbo because they couldn't get remarried, or if they did, they'd get disfellowshipped. Even if they were originally the innocent party, they would immediately get disfellowshipped and shunned because they entered into the congregation didn't recognize that marriage. So, religion interferes with the lives of married couples and families to like so great an extent within the Jehovah's Witness Church, you wouldn't believe it. And I know many. A good friend of mine got herself disfellowshipped. She didn't even know it. The elders stalked her day after day, was coming to her apartment, banging on the door. She had already moved on and is in a healthy relationship, but it's her alcoholic ex-husband who was abusive, like crazy abusive. They wanted to get her disfellowshipped so that he who was still in the congregation, unhealthy a person as he is, so that he wouldn't get disfellowshipped if he went into another relationship.
Wow.
And, if you want to see a story, go watch Lloyd's interview of Brandon Fiquette, because exactly that's what happened to him. They chased him down after leaving Bethel. His wife had cheated on him. It's a whole story. And they disfellowshipped Brandon.
Sounds like a business opportunity to, as an adulterer in the Jehovah's Witness, to kind of break up some of these covenants.
It is, and it's unhealthy, because you have two things. You have either these women who know that they won't be able to remarry, so they stay with an abusive or malignant narcissist of a husband and keep themselves in a danger, or they become promiscuous. We've seen many that say, okay, I'll just go pick a stranger up at the bar or online, and I'll have sex with them. I'll confess to the elders so that I can, I'll do my 6 months, they'll get this fellowship, they think, for 6 months, and then that way they're scripturally free to then remarry. And so we see this really dangerous behavior that this kind of causes.
Yeah, Eric Larson there saying, my conversations with my wife never end well when discussing anything JW related. Cher Andrews says, I lost my marriage to Jehovah's Witnesses after 25. Nilda Gomez says, yes, Mark, when I left, it broke up my marriage because my husband was working towards becoming a ministerial servant. Diana Moreno says, my ex-husband and I left at the same time and shortly thereafter separated. So it does have all sorts of impacts on people's marriages. I mean, in my case, and in the case of, Mark and Kimmy and Sasha and Sherry, it just so happens to have turned out well, but it really, really doesn't end up that way in every case, and it's really very sad.
And that's each couple has to walk its own path, right? There's no right nor wrong here. It's really up to what the individuals need to
sometimes marriages do need to end, and there's no shame when that's the case.
That's right. You don't need to judge that. But I do want to just share with everybody something that Recovering from Religion did this week, which is very valid on this point. Every Monday night, Recovering from Religion is doing a range of talks, and this week's just gone was on thriving in a mixed secular religious relationship. And it was precisely on this, on how do you navigate it when one wakes up, one deconverts, and the other doesn't? How do you work through that relationship? And the points that were raised in this anybody can find this. This is on YouTube. If you just Google YouTube Recovering from Religion, it's already up. It's about an hour long, but I very much recommend that everybody watch it, because it's not just about husband and wife, partners. It's also about relationships. So all of the principles that are spoken about in this particular talk relate to every relationship, whether it's your siblings, your parents, your children, whoever it is. It helps you develop skills so that you can try to have these conversations. It's not going to work all of the time, but there were some really fantastic tips in this talk that I think are going to help a lot of people. So please check that out, because it was a fantastic talk. Well, I can't speak highly enough for the work that Recovering from Religion are doing, and it's been a thrill to have Eric on today's lockdown live stream. Please do check out is it recoveringfromreligion.org? Yes, .org. Fantastic. So, a wealth of resources there. Probably some of you have been wondering as the show draws to an end, because we do 90 minutes for these lockdown live streams. A lot of you will probably have been wondering where Arthur is.
Well, better late than never.
Oh, there he is.
Hey.
Arthur,
So,
everybody was
everybody.
worried about you last week because you never came. Last Saturday because you didn't show back up.
I didn't show back up because, as I said on Wednesday, there were time and unforeseen occurrences that befall us all.
well, Arthur, we are literally wrapping up, but I know lots of people will be hanging on the edge of their seats, wondering whether you have a song for us.
I do have one.
Okay, so shall we have your song as like the outro almost?
Let's have my song as the outro.
Okay, so let me just roll the good grief.
Cue the intro to the outro.
What am I letting us in for here?
And yes, as the outro for this episode, we have a song by the Bangles. It's called "Eternal Flame," which is adapted into a witness-themed song, and it goes like this. Please sing along. Dedicate your lives to Jehovah, people. It's the governing body speaking in Christ Jesus' name. Wanna learn the truth, the good news of the kingdom. Is your soul burning like an eternal flame? I believe this is the truth, Jehovah. And it's your organization. My life belongs to you. Yes, I feel the same, submitting to your teaching. My soul is burning like an eternal flame. Say my name, sun shines through the rain. A new life in worship and no more sin and pain. I don't wanna lose this feeling. Oh.
Air piano.
That's some talent there, Arthur.
Oh yeah.
Say my name, sun shines through the rain. A new life in worship and no more sin and pain. I don't wanna lose this feeling. Oh, dedicate your lives to Jehovah, people. It's the governing body speaking in Christ Jesus' name. Wanna learn the truth, the good news of the kingdom. Is your soul burning like an eternal flame? Dedicate your life to Jehovah, people. It's the governing body speaking in Christ Jesus' name. Wanna learn the truth, the good news of the kingdom. And is your soul burning like an eternal flame?
I like the way you've hit that high note with deftness there, Arthur.
Nailed it.
That was definitely singing and music and a song and all of those things. And
I think he's still going.
It was certainly, yeah. Look, when he's in the zone.
He's in the zone.
Just leave him to it. But yeah, I'll now unmute. He seems to have got the message. And so Arthur, thank you for singing us out there. with a beautiful, and we've even had Sasha at the 11th hour, who feels triggered. So Arthur, you've managed to trigger at least someone in today's lockdown live stream.
Gonna go hug Mr. Thursday.
So I'm not quite sure what's happening at this point, but thank you so much to all of my amazing panelists. It's been a wonderfully entertaining lockdown live stream, which is what we aim for. And there's also been some pearls of wisdom, some
I can't wait to watch the live stream, because I wasn't able to watch it live.
Arthur, I'd love to say that your conclusion was perfectly in line with the tone of the show. Yeah. So so thank you so much. And no, it's been great. We've even got Snoopy making a late appearance. So thank you for that, Mark.
Yeah, maybe Mark can show you his whole collection next time.
Well, we know that on Mark's next appearance, it's going to be a very, very special lockdown live stream, because Mark's already agreed to let Kimmy cut his hair live on a live stream. So we have that to look
very
forward
interesting.
to.
So
yeah,
so something to look for next Saturday.
Mark taking one for the team there enthusiastically. So thank you, Mark.
He's speechless.
He's speechless. He is. So thank you so much, everyone. Viewers, I hope you have enjoyed today's lockdown live stream. Don't forget to stay inside, stay safe, stay positive, and we will see you in our next show. Take care.